Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I call to order the Thursday, July 21st, 2022 meeting of the Marion Borough Council. This is our combined business and workshop meeting. Council runs to me and lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Manager Bryant, will you call the roll?
Absolutely. Council President Fred Bush,
Present.
Council Vice President Michelle Panopoulos,
Here.
Council Member Barbara Fortner,
Here.
Council Member Rob McGreevy,
Here.
Council Member Cindy Rucker,
Here.
Council Member Bob Weisberg,
Here.
Council Member Ira Winston,
Here.
Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
Here.
Thank you. Before we start, I will try to be good about this. I am not always very good at projecting my voice. We're in the big room. There are air conditioners going. We're wearing masks. If anybody who is on Zoom cannot hear us in the room, please let us know. And everybody just try to speak up. I will do the same. Next, I would like to announce that council held an executive session on Monday, July 18th to discuss a personnel matter related to the potential appointment of a public officer, personnel matter related to the terms and conditions of employment of an employee, to consider the purchase or lease of real property, and to consult with its attorney related to identifiable complaints related to the purchase or lease of real property. Next, I believe we will need to make some modifications to the agenda. Manager Bryant, would you like to mention the item that we'll be adding?
Sure. I would like to request that council consider adding an item to the consent agenda. So it would be item 10F. And this item would be approval of an extension with Canoni on our engineering agreement that we have with PennDOT. That agreement is actually slated to expire on June 30th, which was a month ago. So Canoni has requested that we extend it so that they can, continue to have authorization with PennDOT to work on the bridge project.
Thank you. For clarification, Manager Bryant, would this in any way delay the bridge project?
It will not.
Is it administrative change only?
Exactly.
Thank you. Okay. So I will seek from council a motion to make some amendments to the agenda. Let me tell you the other ones that we already reached you. In the interest of allowing those who are presenting tonight and otherwise would not need to be here for the entire meeting to present and go enjoy their evenings, because this may be a lengthy meeting. I'm proposing that we move Chloe Moore from Montgomery County Planning Commission's presentation on the subdivision and land development ordinance from 13A new business, move it, strike it from there and move it under presentation as a new item 9B, or a change item number 9B, that we move the chair of our planning commission's presentation, which is presently on the agenda under item 15 with committee updates, as item 9C. And in addition, under action items 11J, council will be considering resolution 2022-18 for a multimodal grant application. We will need to keep that on the agenda because we will need to take action on that. However, Bill Collins from Simone Collins, I believe, will be presenting some information that is pertinent to that decision. And so I would like to ask if we can move his presentation also under 9, that's item 9D, so that he's not required to wait until the action items to provide that.
Are you good? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Did you want me to speak now or answer questions?
No, we're simply amending the agenda so you can present further.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so to consolidate that, the motion I'm seeking to be adding Canoni's extension letter as new item 10F under the consent agenda, moving item 13A to 9B, moving the planning commission presentation under 15 to 9C, and moving this and adding Mr. Collins's presentation as a new item for 9D. I so move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? The agenda is amended. Thank you very much for your help. President's comments. President Bush, do you have any comments this evening?
Not today, thank you.
And Mayor Deutsch, do you have a report for us?
I do. So in the last few weeks, there have been a few cars that have been rummaged through at night. Almost exclusively, these are cars that are unlocked and often sometimes have keys in them. I make this announcement several times a year. I have for the last 4.5 years. Please lock your cars and make it difficult for people looking for spare change or whatever they're looking for in your vehicles. Make it difficult for them to get in. Let's not be an easy target. It's an easy thing to do that we can do to cut down on these types of petty crimes. And the second thing on my agenda is tomorrow is Chief Gallagher's last day in the borough. And you may have seen it in the newsletter. And if you've not signed up for the weekly newsletter, I would encourage everybody to do that. I just want to take the opportunity, moment to thank Chief Gallagher for the last 4+ years. I think we've taken the police department miles from where it was when I stepped into this role. And I am so thankful for the hard work that he has done, not only as chief, but as the head of our emergency management team. We helped navigate the waters of COVID, and we're still working through them, but we did it. We did it pretty well, as well as any borough in the county. And I'm very happy and proud of the work we've done. I'm proud of the work we've done with the police department. And I just want to take this moment and opportunity to thank him because he's been great to work with. I've really enjoyed working with him. I wish him much success in his next role, which happens to be a 10-minute walk from his house, which is probably the biggest reason for him leaving the borough. It was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. But I thank him and wish him the best of luck and give him the thanks of our community.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, next we have our public comment period. I see some members of the public. I'm not sure if there are any who are asking to comment. Yes.
So generally we, just a quick reminder, sorry, is generally we give the opportunity to people in person first and then the folks on Zoom.
How would we do it? Are there any members of the public present? I was going to remind you, verbal comments are limited to 3 minutes, and prior to giving your comment, you just identify yourself by name and where in the borough you live. Yes.
I spoke previously, we'll just take my mask off so we keep my face for a moment. Dennis Marion, I just wanted to comment that I put my application to Parks and Rec committee, and I certainly welcome the opportunity to do so. Ask for the appointment if you need that's interested in the world. I don't know what recommend down, but I look forward to hopefully helping the world. It's going to my address, good board, for the best.
All right, so for everyone on Zoom, just a quick reminder for those of you who haven't been on Zoom before, is I generally ask that people either literally raise your hand with your video on or do the little hand raise symbol on Zoom. I'll call on people as I see them. You'll see a prompt on your screen for you to unmute, and then you'll have 3 minutes to make your public comment. All right, I actually do not see anyone's, oh, okay, there we go, sorry, now I see hands raised. So the first hand I see raised is Mr. Lawrence Goldberg.
Hello, good evening, Lawrence Goldberg, 200 Sabine Avenue. So I'm here to talk about 201 Sabine. It seems that the council is on a trajectory when it comes to and the name of the trajectory is dense development. They've been talking about it on and off for years. In 2019, the former borough manager, Mr. Metrick, prepared, which was a draft RFP, in which he stated that an ideal proposal for the site would include dense development. So just to be clear, this was early 2019, well before there was any community engagement. So this document formed the basis of what he used to hire RES consultants, and then subsequently, about a year later, to go out and ask the public what we want. So it was already decided and already in the document that dense development was the goal of the RFP. When the public was engaged and surveys was done, it turned out that in fact the overwhelming majority of us want a park from corner to corner. And in fact, the overwhelming minority and the number 10 out of spots want that the property to be used to raise revenue. So it seems like everything's being done to try to find a justification for a solution that's already been predetermined. First, it was said that the reason that we need development there is to provide a facility for daycare and to help facilitate and subsidize the daycare partially in the building. In fact, less than 1% of the population of the borough at any given time actually goes to the daycare. It's probably less than 0.5%. We've learned that it's in the single digits, the number of people that actually go there. So you have about 1% of the population that would benefit from that. And I would say 99 to 100% that could benefit from a park that would be corner to corner and it would be accessible to all folks that are not homebound. So it's clear what the public wants. And yet what's happened is after the public was engaged, the borough went straight back to now finding another consultant and now engaging Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority and going back to the original dense development goal. The role of council is to be public servants and to represent the will of the majority. When a decision is made in council, you need a simple majority of 4 out of 7 council members. You do not need unanimity. So you see what the majority of the population.
Your time has expired.
That's great.
All right, let's see. Who else on Zoom would like to make public comment? I see Carol Marie Scanlon. Let me give you the unmute here.
Good evening. So I know that you council members know that I and many of our neighbors, what we feel about the development at 201 Sabine, especially the development over on our park. And as Lawrence said, we advocate for a park from corner to corner, not only based on the increased density of Narberth and the 130 so new apartment units that are coming, but because of the national park standards that show a town such as Narberth should have 40 plus acres of open park, and we have less than 10. So I have questions for you just about what Lawrence had said. And I want to know, how has any member of this council or member of the office staff, zoning board, or legal team had any communication with members of the Wonder Spring staff or management regarding the plans for Wonder Spring at the current 201 Sabine location and or plans for the new daycare center anywhere on 201 Sabine? And if so, what was the content of those conversations? I'd also like to know, has any member of this council, members of the office staff, zoning board, and legal team had any communications with a development firm for the plans at 201 Sabine and the content of those conversations? And I'd also like to know if any members of this council, members of the office staff, zoning board, legal team have had communication with the Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority and the content of those conversations. Also, has any contract or scope of work been discussed or executed with the Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority? And I would like to ask council for these answers to be entered into the public record, or the lack of answers also noted in the public record. And speaking of a public record, I'd also like to ask why the public comment has digressed from allowing written letters to the public to be read into public record, to Fred Bush saying he'd only read a one-page letter, to not reading any letters that are sent to council but would be entered into public record. And now an edict was given that no letters from the public will be entered into the public record at all, but they will be placed in a file. This seems like suppression of public comment. Why is this council not willing to publicly share letters from the public? And lastly, I'd like to know why this council still will not schedule public engagement meetings with the residents of Narberth that you vow to represent regarding 201. Especially, as Lawrence said, the meetings that we did have showed an overwhelming majority of the residents that responded want a park and not a development. When we asked last month, I asked what the financials are that the borough needs from any development on Sabine, a new daycare center, or affordable housing units, and the response was, we do not know. So why will you not open discussions in person with dialogue to the borough residents? Because as you know, Narberth residents are really, really smart. Look what happened with the 4th of July committee. It was great. A lot of people.
All right, would anyone else like to make a public comment here tonight that hasn't already spoken? All right, I see no further public comment on Zoom.
I do not see it. Okay, moving on to presentation item 9A. Presentation on the 146 Marion Avenue tentative sketch plan. I believe there are 18 in the building, but not in the room, so we'll bring them in for that presentation. What? No, just a second. Just a second.
I'm ready for us to make a presentation with respect to this proposed subdivision. As you know, we had a subdivision application which before you for action this evening for 146 Marion Road. Historically, as council was aware, 9 months ago, we received tentative sketch plan approval for a subdivision that had 4 twin homes on this property, and would result in the demolition of the existing home. During the course of that plan review, there had been a lot of comment by the planning commission and by the that expressed unhappiness, with regard to the loss of the existing home, and also some concern about the size of the 2 twins on both Rockland and Marion Road. And following that meeting, there were discussions with members of the planning commission about the possibility of an alternative plan, one that would require an ordinance amendment that would be approved by Borough Council. So we tabled ourselves on the filing of the preliminary plan application, and instead worked with the planning commission as they considered an ordinance that would be appropriate for the borough, and also would be, if you will, tested on our property to see how it might apply and what the results would be of a new ordinance that applied to 146 Marion. That culminated in an infill ordinance
And in the interim, also historic district ordinance that was passed by our council. With the benefit of that infill ordinance, we prepared a new subdivision plan that preserves the existing column and creates a twin on Marion that is smaller in scale, considerably smaller in scale than the twins that previously had been approved on the tentative sketch plan. And it also resulted in cottages, 2 cottages on Rockland Avenue that are very small buildings and provide a different type of housing, a smaller housing that has been built in recent years in the borough. And it was considered desirable because it provides that additional variety and accordingly more affordable housing for those 2 units. So it was that plan that our client prepared, working with Chris John, the civil engineer, and Jack Burns, the architect. And we have moved that plan forward with the reviews that we've received from the Planning Commission. We were before the Planning Commission this month. And just last night, we were before the zoning board. And the reason we appeared before the zoning board is that there is parking in a garage in the second lot line on this property, and parking in a garage that faces the street, the garage being 10 feet beyond the front facade, is specifically permitted by special exception with the zoning district. So we are now before you tonight. This is the first time that you have received a presentation from us, and what we would like to do is have Chris John go through and describe to you the proposed plan, the engineering drawing, and then have Jack Burns, our architect, describe to you what is happening to the house, being moved on the site. And will be provided with a basement and foundation. He will describe to you that, and will also describe the twins that are proposed on Marion, as well as the 2 cottages and the garages for those cottages on Rock. So thank you for considering this tonight. And with that, Chris, if you would like to come up and talk about the place. I don't know whether you have them on the screen. Chris has them on boards. He can bring the boards close here. Chris, do you want to come over here? Would it be better if he were here by the microphone?
It would, yeah.
He's going to speak.
Good evening. My name is Kurt Dior. I'm the one here for the project. I'm going to start with field and the proof. Then that was part of the conversation and how we got here on the This is that plan that shows the removal of the existing buildings. There's a very large twin on Marion Avenue and a large 10 foot on Rockland Avenue. And part of the big concern with those is just how wide that building is. So I won't spend a lot of time on it. But I think it's nice to just see the difference looking back and forth between the 2. This is the proposed plan. And just for ease of description, the existing house is currently in the upper right portion of the lot. If you're looking at plan view, it's being moved to the upper left part. Still will have access on Marion Avenue. There's a new twin building proposed in the upper right of Marion Avenue. And then we have 2 cottages proposed facing Rockland Avenue. You can see with the separation, there's 14 feet of separation between the cottages and a little more than 14 feet between the relocated house and inn.
So that's what the old and the kind of all. To see that the existing home, the relocated home, and the twins, we have a parking credit at the Marion Avenue, so they do not have any driveways or garages. But Rockland Avenue does not have any parking credits. There's no parking on the north side of Rockland. And so we're proposing some attached garages in the second operator that is president of the zone here where that's right, or special exception for the approval of. This is tentative sketch phase, so we're mostly just dealing with the layout, all the layout at this point. We do have some extensive average grade calculations, some encouraging calculations, the zoning chart in the bottom left of the plan. We received a review letters from the borough engineer, the borough zoning officer, and the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Those letters are all notified as we go through with the planning commission. I will note that the zoning officer's letter at first has 7 comments, because we had to go through this hearing board. The borough prefers that we make any revisions so that it has a full letter. And so his new letter only had 2 comments. One was to get the special exception that we received last night, and the second comment was for items in the preliminary or final planning stage. Just a few other items to note. We are showing some street trees, although it's a little premature for that. If we have the correct number, we won't have species on there yet, or other trees throughout the development. We get into the preliminary landscape and registered landscape architect will design. We're showing underground stormwater management systems in between the houses and the streets. Again, that's not fully designed at this point, but that's the plan that what we intend to do for stormwater management. I think I've covered the main points, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. I'm sure we'll to check first.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Burns. I'm architect at Encore, which owns somewhere else. I can run through all the individual buildings. I can do a couple besides that. I'm looking to prefer to see at this point, but well, I guess we'll start with the twins then. So here are the 2 twins that are proposed in Marion Avenue. The basement on the left, the approach to the homes, Marion's at the top of the sheet. Very spacious, generous porch. Enter the home, living room, dining room, kitchen at the first floor with the back of the house spaces in here. Staircase up. Arrive at the second floor here. Bedroom 1 with an ensuite, master bedroom back towards the center. Smallish laundry room there. And additional stairs to the 3rd floor, where you will have bedroom 3, bedroom 4, and a den home office tech space in the middle. Here are the for the cottages at the rear, they are similar buildings substantially, just 2 of the same building. We have a basement at the first floor, another substantial, nice sitting porch out towards the front, small entry hallway, passageway back to a kitchen, dining, and a great room feel, and a living room. We have a garage at grade here with no clear connection between the 2. This is an older drawing that shows a lot of fire. And as we come up the second floor, the cottages are smaller in height than the twins are at front. We arrive at a master suite with a bathroom, a walk-in closet shared, and then 2 bedrooms and share a hall bath, and a small walk-in closet on the second floor. And here, I guess this is the primary elevation we're concerned with right here. This is the elevation facing Rockland. So we have, again, a nice sitting porch, plenty of glass in the living room, plenty of glass in the second floor, garage at grade here, and then this is a portion of one of the storage area. And then corresponding elevations for the rest of the building.
So Jack, if I can ask you a question, what is the height of the cottage?
It is below the 25. It is 24 something.
Okay. It's under the 25-foot maximum height permitted for a cottage.
That is 24 feet.
And my other question is, could you describe to Borough Council what's contemplated with regard to the relocation of the existing home on site?
Absolutely. Joe and Summer have begun speaking with, oh, they're pretty far along the way. There's a couple different house moving companies that are available. They've selected one. We've had several meetings with them at this point, and it's very similar to the documentary. If you've ever seen the Lighthouse moving, it's very similar. They're going to build a new foundation, pick up the old house, put steel under it, move it over, and put it back down. This is what these people do every day of their lives for years and years and years. So at balance state.
So it is contemplated there will be a new foundation for that home. We would include a basement underneath.
Correct. We'll recreate a full basement for the existing building.
Thank you. So that's a description of the plan and the proposed elevations, and we're happy to have any questions or discussion with council with regard to that.
I have one question. What is the height of the relocated building? I mean, it would be on a new foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the foundation is exactly the same above grade or if the building height varies.
It'll be similar to what it is now. It may vary by a foot or two. It's going to be lower on the overall site. The site grades down that way, so the home itself will be less tall related to the street, but the actual number,
And it will need to meet code.
Thank you.
Just two questions. What is the garage solution? And the planning commission raised that the cottages.
we went into some greater detail with it. I have a bad habit of showing the world's biggest cars in garages when I'm working with clients to try and let them know what's going on. We put in a medium-sized car and refined some of the details of how the garage actually works. So the clearance is that we provided basically a Toyota Prius in the garage. I'm sure the clearance is fine. So the clarification, the interior dimensions are 9'7.5" left to right. And 18'5" front to back.
And just a little further description on that, I think with the Prius in the garage, we have a garage door that's a standard 8-foot door, which is a smaller single door, but it's a stock standard single car garage. And we're dealing with cottages here, the smaller buildings. So we think it's appropriately scaled, and Jack can comment on that. And when parked in the garage, there is a 30-inch door swing for the driver's side, which we've experimented with our own cars. It's more than adequate on the driver's side. On the passenger side, it's 17 inches. So for all practical purposes, we recognize that the passenger isn't going to get in the car, at least in the front seat of the car. They get easy access to the rear seats from the driver's side. But on the front side of the car, passenger will get in the car when the car's out of the garage, and will get out of the car when the car's out of the garage, which frankly, on this particular property makes a lot of sense because the entry to the house is fairly far advanced. And if we can go back to the site plan, Chris, we have the front porch is here, and steps from the sidewalk or the street is in somewhat central to the porch, we'll all say. But if the passenger were let out of the car before going into the garage, they'd be very close to where the steps are that you need to get access to the home. So while it has that little technical flaw of not having a nice full door swing on the right side like it does on the left side, for all practical purposes, it just isn't going to affect the usability and function of that garage. Driver's going to be able to get in and out of it quite easily and comfortably. Passenger front will need to get in and out for all practical purposes outside of the garage. But we think having a garage of this size and scale is appropriate to what is a small, otherwise relatively narrow home. So that's the thinking of it. So,
I'm sorry, may I ask a follow-up garage question?
Go ahead, Cynthia.
I'm sorry. So you're thinking here, if I can follow you, is a 4-bedroom house it's appropriate to expect that perhaps a family is going to have a car no bigger than a Prius and is going to have their children exit in the driveway while they then pull into the car because there's not enough space for them to put a kid into a car seat? So I'm just curious how a 4-bedroom house matches with the expectation of a car no larger than a Prius, where you would have to have all riders, potentially minors or kids, exit before moving into the garage. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it's a practical matter. It's a 3-bedroom house. First of all, Jack has pointed out it's a 3-bedroom house, not a 4-bedroom. But same question, so I think it's a practical matter. Whoever is getting in or out of that car, other than the driver, is going to get in and out of it once the car is pulled out of the garage. Can a driver get a couple of kids in the back seat of the garage? And the answer is sure. There's lots of room on that left side to access the front door and the back door of the car.
Okay.
Right side, no.
Just no larger than a Prius, though.
If you've got a Suburban, this garage is not for you. But there are a lot of one-car garages all over Harvard that if you've got a Suburban, the garage is not for you. While we can't control who is living in this house, these are smaller homes, it's a smaller house opportunity. Whoever would buy the home would assess the usability of the garage, which is I'm sure the pace brought on. The people make different decisions with respect to when and how they use the garage. And you could probably get that larger vehicle, and I'm not sure it's Suburban, but you had looked at it, Jack, a little bit for larger vehicles, and you can get some larger vehicles in there, not just the Prius. They would fit, and you'd be able to get it. Would it be as much door swing? Well, every inch of car width, you're going to get a little reduced door swing. It's commensurate with the additional.
Ira?
Yeah. So, what is preventing you from making the garage larger? Is it you'd be too close to the property line, or using too much of the lot?
Well, I guess you're correct.
Okay.
You've got a.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fine. And then, you need these garages for parking, or you would get a street credit for Rockland?
Well, we don't need a street credit for Rockland. Do we need the garages for parking?
But to meet with the parking code?
Yeah, no, we don't. Yeah, you can have a carport, you can have surface parking, you can have a garage. They're permitted in the second lot layer by special exception. We think it's an attractive feature for the home, both architecturally and from the standpoint of any homeowner who would like at times to have the security of their car.
No, but I'm asking you a very specific question. Like, if you didn't have this garage, would this be conforming, would this project be code conforming? Would it be by right?
Oh, we need a special exception for the park.
Oh, okay, but you would get it.
I think so, yes.
Okay, because the reality is, and I just was stated in planning, so I'm not saying it's been a new thing that I figured out. You know, one of the gyms that's planning figured this out. These are storage. They're going to be used as storage for bikes or whatever. But you don't need it. You don't need this. You're not doing this to like all of a sudden need a parking.
Yeah, no, and let me add also, from the standpoint of storage, there is the ability to put a neat, small shed, at the back of the house, at the back of the garage, that would work. So if somebody wanted, for whatever reason, had a little element of storage here, that could be done very nicely. You would not need.
Share my perspective. So if we're talking about my property, I'm sorry, but I actually have my eye on a cottage. So I'm sorry, I was a little bit late in the place for me. I currently live in this house. I've been in here for over a decade. Yes, during COVID, I did go and lease it out because I moved my daughter with different challenges to another area where she actually thrived. We've been back for 2 months. Our renters left on the May 30th, and my daughter graduated from high school on June 8th, and by June 11th, 9th, and 11th, we drove up. By June 11th, we were back with the house. Of this is too much for me. This house now is too much. And so as we're moving it over and looking at what is interesting to me, this is the house that I would like to live in. And so we're talking about a house that I'm interested in. And I have been living in Narberth, and I used to park here. But I mean, actually, I park in the garage usually. And all of my neighbors here have garages that are about the same size. And some of them use that garage and some of them don't. It's just a personal choice. I personally now have a smaller car. I used to drive a Suburban, so I love the analogy. But now I drive a much smaller car because I don't have to lug all the children around. And this house fits me better. So maybe a young family would like it. But I think the idea was that there was a code change in order to allow people to keep the historic home, which I was heartbroken when we learned the only reason we were able to do by right was in order to knock our house down and put 2 Goliath homes here, who everyone was upset about, including myself. And so the whole idea here was that if we could keep this home, then we could do the other things that this community talks about, which is diversity. And so that's why these houses are here. And the only thing was, I would like garage, maybe somebody else would like the garage. So I just wanted to share from the context of somebody who lives on the property and who would like to live in this house. That's my perspective. Thank you. Thank you. Council members, bearing in mind that we will be considering resolution to approve this project under action item 11A, will have ample opportunity to sort of discuss the merits of it and to go through the limitations and conditions in the resolution. For now, are there any other questions that you'd like to ask to the team before they
just have one more question?
Ross.
So Narberth does have a climate action plan that's quite aggressive with carbon neutral goals for the community for 2035. It's not something that we can impose on new construction, but I know that you and the client are community minded. I wonder if there are considerations as part of the project beyond stormwater. I'm talking about energy, EV charging, electric heating, this kind of thing. I wonder if that's being considered.
It enters into my work regularly. To be quite honest with you, we haven't made it that far talking about what we're thinking about the very, very specific portions of it yet, but I would imagine so. And current energy code coming into effect the current energy code coming into effect is gone a long way for helping that process as well. Yeah. I'm certain we would look into doing things like that. I think a Tesla charger, things like that are amenities that people are looking for.
Any further questions for the team? Okay, I don't see any, and so I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Excellent. And we will, as I said, we will be discussing the resolution for 11A. I don't know how long to get there. If you wish to wait around, please do. Okay, next up, Chloe Moore, the Montgomery County Planning Commission, is going to give us an overview and facilitate a little bit of discussion on the subdivision and land development ordinance draft, which is located at page 170 of the packet. It is a 100-page document, so I think it goes without saying we are not going to be covering it in enormous amount of detail this evening.
I promise not to read it to you. Do you have a preference for whether I stand up, better stand up there?
I think it's easier to do with the microphone, if that's all right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chloe Moore. I'm a community planner with the Montgomery County Planning Commission, and I am now the planner working with NARBR. I'm really great to be at a council meeting, see all of you. And I'm here because we've been working. I'm here because we've been working on a draft subdivision and land development ordinance, called pretty short for the borough. Many states have unified development codes, which cover everything in New Zelanda and the South. Some states doesn't have that. It's two codes, zoning ordinance, which you're all familiar with, and subdivision land development ordinance. Zoning ordinance covers uses and dimensional requirements, subdivision and land development ordinance covers tends to cover things more like site improvement, utility connections, a lot of engineering requirements, and also this full set of plan processing and review what impacts and how that whole review process works is all covered in that. So another main difference worth noting is that to get a variance from the zoning ordinance, and obviously has to go to the zoning hearing board. To get a waiver from a requirement in the South, that's simply a legal requirement. So the way that you can into the ordinance works is also pretty different. So why are you writing this? Your current value, I would say, is on the sparse side, especially for a borough like ours that sees a fair amount of development. There's a number of things that it's just silent on, doesn't address at all. And then there's some things that haven't been working that well for the borough. So the draft provides a number of those things. And I would say that in working with the Planning Commission, there are still more things that we'd like to discuss and address. However, there's a workable draft right now that we wanted to share with you, and it's kind of up to you whether you want to try to proceed with this workable draft, adopt it because it's better than what's there, and then consider amendments in the future. And like all code, there are always going to be amendments in the future. It's never finished. But knowing what some of those revisions are, there is actually sort of wait and try to add, keep working with things. Let me just highlight a couple of the more interesting things I consider in the code. And I will send you, or you just may have to look them up, kind of a list of some of these that you can look through if you haven't already had the opportunity to read all 100 pages of the draft. One that's pretty important is that the borough's current code has a tentative sketch plan, submission, review, and approval phase, then a preliminary plan, submission, and review phase, and then a final plan. The new draft makes the tentative sketch plan phase optional for the applicant. There's a couple of reasons for that, which I could go into if there's some good reasons to move in that direction. It's a big change in terms of how you've been doing things. And there's reasons to still encourage the applicant. There's a lot of benefits both for the applicant and the borough to go through the tentative sketch plan phase where they haven't invested as much in engineering as you would need to for a preliminary plan, but can get initial feedback, especially in a conversation with the planning commission in which nothing is voted on, but where plans are reviewed and commented on. And one thing about that council may want to weigh in on is how to encourage applicants to go through the tentative sketch plan phase, even though it's optional. And that would be things like making the requirements for submission easier, less stringent or less involved, or reducing fees or costs that are involved, He said not to have all the components for reasons that can do if you wanted to, you were request the applicant. That's kind of a decision about what policy direction we go in. I need to look my notes for one again. Of course. She's on my left.
Michelle, can I ask? I'm sorry. I don't know if others, it's so muffled at the mic. It's really difficult to understand. I don't know if I'm the only one with that issue, but it's helpful to have people maybe even sit next to Samantha's computer, unless I'm the only one hearing muffled.
No, I'm having difficulty as well.
Let's give that a try. Okay, let me try from where I was sitting. Okay. Let me know if this is better.
That's crystal clear on my end.
Okay, easier without the mic then. If you all, well, most of you don't care that much probably, but if you want to hear me and you can,
There's
let
a
me
two
know.
folks in the audience who hear a lot of it.
Okay. Let me point out another new thing that I think is pretty interesting to council, and you may have discussed this before, but many municipalities have a requirement for the dedication of recreation land in a development scenario. And what that means, where that came from is, let's say you're a suburban community or a rural transitioning to suburban community, just not in Arbor, but this is where this came from. And you have a new development that's going to be a lot of new homes, people that didn't live there before. Usually a township there was state enabling legislation that allowed a township to say, you have to set aside part of your giant tract as a park for these new people, because we're going to need parks when more people live here. So that's where that came from. But there's a lot of municipalities that have applied it in the context like Narberth, where it is very developed, and request the dedication of land as part of a development. But you provide an option in the code to pay a fee in lieu of land dedication. And unlike some other fee in lieu provisions in the state code, this is quite permissive. You can use the money that's dedicated for park maintenance, new equipment at park, like new playground equipment, and you can also use it to acquire new park land, sort of the original intention. But you're allowed to use it for basic operations and maintenance of parks, which, of course, always very helpful to have that type of funding. But there is some question about how exactly you want to calculate the amount of land that's requested, how you would calculate the fee that would be paid in lieu of land dedication, how much you want those to be. So we have something in the draft, but it's something you may want to review and discuss. And then just one other thing I wanted to point out is that there's a requirement for a transportation impact study to be submitted with larger land developments. That's a really common thing in a lot of municipalities' codes. It requires examining various things about the transportation system and proposing potential improvements or solutions to transportation issues that might be raised by additional new trips that are created by a larger development. But that's a part of this draft that you might want to read carefully and consider, whether that is what you want to ask for and what that threshold is. And many municipalities have landscaping ordinances as part of their SALDOs. Narberth is separate, and we have not touched that as part of this review. There's no reason that it has to be included in the SALDO. It's fine as a standalone ordinance. And our office, some of my colleagues are working on a new model landscaping ordinance. So I would recommend that you just hold off on that, worry about the whole SALDO, and then when we have the new model, look at that, see how you want to apply parts of that here. I do think that needs to be updated, and I've heard that from various people. And I'm happy to take any comments or questions now. I also welcome any of you to email me or call me. I'm happy to talk to you about this or anything planning related. And if it's the policy issue that you have a comment on, it needs to be discussed in a public forum. Obviously, if you make that comment to me, I'll take it back to the planning commission where I attend monthly and discuss it there, or of course, have it on your agenda here whenever you choose. Okay, so I'm happy to have questions.
Norbert's zoning-based code oftentimes runs the line of something that is like a subdivision ordinance. And putting this together, have you been also comparing it to what's in the zoning ordinance to make sure it's not duplicative or conflicting with the zoning code?
That's a great question. There are certain things in Pennsylvania, as you well know, that can only be in zoning or can only be in Saldo. And then there's anything related to design could be in either code, typically allowed by the state to go either way that you choose. And Norbert has a lot of that in the zoning code. So we have incorporated a number of terms and ways of thinking about lots and design into the Saldo, like an applicant is required to identify lot layers on the sketch plan that's submitted, things like that, or on the preliminary plan submitted. Other terms, frontage types and building types, those are terms a lot of codes don't use. So those are now included in the Saldo. And we're cross-referencing as much as we can. There are some things that are going to need to be cleaned up in zoning after this. And I have, a running list of things to reconcile, work with the planning commission on some recommended zoning updates that would come along with this. So we're definitely looking at the zoning code as we've gone through this.
Thank you.
Do any other council members have questions for Chloe?
I just wanted to confirm our timeline. So we have a month or two, so we could review it and
so I think Nikki, you're thinking about the stormwater ordinance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no firm deadline on this one.
Okay.
That's kind of my question, is just what is it that is needed from council at this point and by when? Because I in the planning commission's letter to us for this month, they point out some things that need to be done. And they're saying, the sections like definitions and process needs to be reviewed. And I'm like, are they asking us to review those, or are they saying that's a planning commission task, but they want to know whether we're approving that? So, and that's, you may not know the answer to that because that's kind of a planning commission question, but I'm just trying to understand what's needed from us at this point. I'm really excited this is all being done, but I'm not sure what I should be doing. Should I be reading this whole document just yet?
I have a partial answer to that, and I think other people may also want to weigh in. I know that some members of the borough staff and other consultants are eager to see this enacted because there's certain things about the procedural issues that I think would be a lot easier with the revisions that are being proposed here. Some of the items the planning commission has brought up that they'd like to discuss and see in the future. I think that there's not a lot of urgency around, like the possibility of having some kind of environmental impact study accompanying land development. That's an idea for discussion. It would be interesting. It's not sort of essential to the new code. There's I don't know. So one possibility would be for council to take time to look at sort of the key issues that may need some policy direction and see if you feel comfortable what's in the draft, or if you want to recommend something different or request that we draft something different. And then sort of let you work with the planning commission to come up with a revised draft and it feels.
Yes, thank you. And just to mention that Todd will be presenting next on some zoning revisions. And one thing I would like to actually have us ask Todd while he is here is to sort of review the timeline, the upcoming sort of milestones and deadlines as he sees them. And then he can give us more feedback on what kind of input is appropriate at this time for those members of council or the public who may be listening, who really want to give more granular feedback. When is that welcome, and what is the best way to do that? Is that through email? Is that by attending certain key meetings? So I'm going to ask Todd to address that. That's great. Thanks.
And just as an FYI, I did let him into the meeting a few minutes ago, I think, and maybe he had a connection and shared something, but he's not in the participant list now.
Okay, well, if he's not, then we might need to switch the agenda and have Mr. Collins first. But for now, are there any further questions for no?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to work on this. We are not going to be addressing this later in the meeting, so while you're welcome to stay with us, if you would like to take in the rest of our scintillating agenda, and we're not obligated to.
I appreciate that. I'm going to hand the council members who are here in person. Thank you. They haven't been here before, and I'll make sure that it's public on
Thank you.
So is Todd online? No. Okay. Do you want me to take a motion to amend the agenda? Can you just do a switcheroo here?
I think we can just do a
switcheroo here. Are you ready?
I'm giving the presentation. Samantha, are you?
So I think maybe Bill, I'll introduce you to the community here, and then Bill, I'll introduce you to the community and say a few words about the big picture of why you're here tonight. And then if you could get into some of the details for the benefit of the public and council. And then if I think there's anything else to throw in, I'll do that.
Okay.
So I'm really grateful to have Bill Collins with us here tonight. For anyone who doesn't know, Bill Collins is with Simone Collins, the folks who are working on the Town Square project for the borough. And he brought to our attention a grant opportunity for that project that as well ties in some other elements that Borough Council has talked about and our comprehensive plan references. And so it is a time-sensitive grant application. It will be due by the end of the month. So Bill is here tonight, and we have a resolution later in the agenda for council to consider for the required, well, actually not required this year, but the matching funds that would make our application much more competitive. So I'll let Bill here speak to some of the details about what we're asking council to consider tonight. And that way the public as well has an idea of what all we're proposing to do here.
Thank you, Samantha. Simone Collins, says not to me.
No, I think it's right.
Simone Collins are landscape architects and planners. This is in Marion, County. We're selected by our borough to develop your concept for the Station Square. As we're doing that, we're looking at all.
I did receive a message from a council member who's online who said that this microphone it's too muffled for when it goes to the owl. Can we find a way?
We could have Bill
next to you. Our council members.
So we're going to take a seat by the owl here instead of using the mic. That way everyone can hear you.
The mic, we can hear you great, but they can hear you.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
feel like I'm just a witness.
I think Bill, actually, you want to all right, so Mike's also one of Bill. Do you want to say it?
How's that, folks? Can you hear me better now?
All right.
Yeah.
Stay fine.
Okay, it's more comfortable. Simone Collins was selected to be the borough's consultant to develop the concept for Station Square. And Station Square is a relatively small space, but it's impacted by a lot of things. The station, obviously, but the local roads, stormwater, the businesses that are developing around it, and all the utilities above and below grade. So these are some of the things that we're considering as we're trying to take the public comment and turn it into a concept plan that is capable of being developed and the preferred design. Now, when we finish our work this fall, we will have a concept design that we know can be built. But we can't go straight to construction. There are other phases of engineering that are needed. And so one of the tasks that we were selected for was our knowledge of grant funding. And we said that we would start that right away. And every year, there's a series of grants that have different applicability to your Station Square project. The one that came up first this year was Department of Community Economic Development. It's a state agency that has several grants, and this one that's due at the end of July is called a multimodal. And that's transportation-related grant, but it's a very versatile grant program in that it allows for preliminary engineering tasks where most of the other programs want to go straight to final design, and this project's not ready to do that. So to catch this wave for this year and get an application in, we suggested from what we know now and looking at another grant application that was just submitted but not accepted, I worked with Samantha and we came up with 3 tasks for this multimodal grant, one being the Station Square itself, the other one being the routes to the Station Square, and the third one being the stormwater, which is a often overlooked component of land use and transportation projects. But there's stormwater that flows onto your Station Square site, into your Station Square site, and off of your Station Square site. And everything flows down towards the creek that crosses under the park. And that's the way your stormwater leaves the borough. So you really can't wait until final design to start considering all these things. And so and I'm going to leave it there and turn it back to Samantha. But we're preparing a grant application, and I guess before the board tonight is the official vote on submitting that grant application, right?
That's perfect. So as many of you on council and the public may remember, when we were designing the RFP that resulted in us bringing Simone Collins on board, we envisioned this project as 2 phases. Phase 1 being the concept plan that Bill referenced that they're working on right now, and then phase 2 being the remaining design and planning and engineering to get from concept plan to something we can actually put out to bid and have someone construct for us. So phase 1, our current time frame is that Bill's team will be making a presentation to council at your October 5th work session for the phase 1 concept plan for you to review and discuss. Once council reaches a place where we've approved that concept plan, the timing of this grant, I think, works out really well because we will get an award notification on this grant around the same time that council would be, making a decision on the concept plan. So it really keeps the momentum of the project going and would be kind of a smooth sort of funding transition from the money the borough has already allocated for phase 1 going into phase 2. And given that I think we fully intended to fund and do phase 2, or else we wouldn't have paid for phase 1, I think this grant makes a lot of sense because if there was money we were going to spend anyhow, why not get some state funding, to offset what our local taxpayers would have been paying for anyhow. And as Bill mentioned, the TCDI grant to look at a borough-wide transportation and borough-wide multimodal transportation, unfortunately, we were not awarded. So I'm looking at the Station Square. This grant would at least do multimodal planning for us along the length of Haverford Avenue from Narberth Avenue down to Wynwood Avenue. And that's easily, the most heavily used stretch of the borough. And again, when you think about people using the station, I think it's a very strong case to be made. You already have the multimodal of the station itself. You have the SEPTA bus route, which is later on the agenda here that currently runs down Haverford Avenue. We have the recent bike pilot that we did along the stretch of Haverford Avenue. You have a lot of pedestrians on Haverford Avenue. And then as Bill mentioned as well, one of our ongoing concerns in the borough, of course, is stormwater. And again, I give Bill a lot of credit for coming up with that idea. this, grant opportunity could be a great one for us to address some of the planning and some of the improvements that we need to make with stormwater in that vicinity. Again, to make it a more accessible and usable area for the public. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I can maybe get into it more when we get to the agenda item, but council tonight would need to give myself and Bill the authorization to actually submit the grant. And in addition, we're asking council to consider contributing a $60,000 match. This $60,000 from the borough would help us get $270,000 in state funding. So I think that's a pretty good return on investment. Again, given that, that's less money than we would have had to spend if we had only been doing the phase 2 planning for Station Square. So I think myself and Bill welcome any questions that members of council here or on Zoom have about what we're proposing for council to consider later on.
Do any council members have any questions for Bill? Well, thank you very much. You're dismissed. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Todd?
Yes, we do have Todd now.
Great. Okay, so next up, item 9D, new 9D, I guess Todd Breslin will be discussing his planning commission memorandum and some proposed zoning revisions.
All right, Todd, you should see a prompt on your screen asking you or giving you the ability to unmute yourself. There we go.
Take advantage of that.
We can hear you now, Todd.
Okay, so good evening. I just joined, so I was not able to hear what preceded me. Are you interested? What is the specific topic?
Todd, you have like a lot of there's like some background noise when you're speaking.
Well, right now I'm shuffling through papers. Is it that, or is it like a hum?
There we go. Okay, yeah, the shuffling papers made us unable to hear you, but now I can hear you.
Okay, so is the topic the green building?
Yeah, council's hoping to hear more from you about both the green building as well as kind of they'd asked a question to Chloe earlier about our pathway for your kind of thoughts on how council can best work with the planning commission to move this out forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me just 1 second. I apologize. I really just ran in here.
And I'm really grateful for you being here tonight, Todd. So definitely take your time.
Okay, I have my notes. I'm ready. So let's talk about the saldo for a minute. We have had numerous meetings with Chloe over the last year, really accelerating over the last 3 months to review various details of the saldo. We were under the impression that it was important to get it in front of council this month for some reason. I wasn't sure what the reason was, but we concluded it still needs a little more work. There are a couple of categories of things that need more work, and whether we work on them or not now or later is really a question for council in terms of priority. There's a lot of nailing down of technical language, which obviously should be done before anything is really considered for enactment. There are some sections of the design standards that need further research, standards for lighting, standards for bicycle parking, which we would appreciate if MCPC, if Chloe would actually bring us fully formulated proposals for that we could evaluate and then recommend inclusion in the ordinance. And then there are a couple of topics related to plans and studies that in certain circumstances we might request of applicants. That would be a traffic impact study, and then potentially some sort of historic impact or historic resource study. Those really need a lot more research and development. And I feel that unless those are high priority for council, it might be better to get the rest of the saldo in good shape, and then seek approval of it and work on those later. So I guess it's sort of like tiering the work that needs to be done and understanding what council's time frame and priorities are. That would be helpful. So that's my take on that topic.
Samantha, can you speak to, I mean, my understanding is that completing the saldo is a high priority item. We've been saying that as for at every meeting for 6 to 9 months. And I think that with respect to council, I think it would be helpful to us to understand at what point we should read this draft closely and begin giving really sort of more granular input. But I really appreciate that Chloe's already flagged for us the high level policy issues. And I wrote them all down, and I'm going to go through the draft initially with the eye to really look at those things, because I think that we should have a council discussion soon on those things, because that's but without a doubt, I know there are council members, Barbara, who will want to go through this and really help on a detailed level, and it's invaluable. So at what point would that should we be reading it on a more granular level? Is it right for that now? That's the question.
If you're asking me, I can't say, and the reason is because we provided a lot of comments at our last planning commission meeting, and I know that Chloe has worked on the ordinance subsequent to that, and she gave a new draft, and I haven't really had a chance to look at that, so I'm not sure whether that would be ready or not. But in general, what I'd say is when there's a draft that has been, before it gets to you, read very carefully so that all of the kind of really complicated technical kinks are just ironed out. A lot of that has to do with definitions. Council President Bush raised a couple of procedural things that we thought could be clarified a little bit. When all those little things are worked out, then it would be time, I think, for council to read it. As I said, there are a couple of other components that for example, traffic impact studies or other kinds of impact studies that could conceivably wait till later, because either as they're presented now, they're okay, or because they're not really the urgent or core kind of priorities of what needs to be addressed in the saldo.
Yeah. Well, I would just add that I think there's some question here of, is there someone who feels this is really urgent is it okay to take 6 months to sort of go, okay, I can do a bunch of research on bicycle parking and present, have a presentation to the planning commission, and we spend half of the meeting discussing that, and then we go on to the next topic. That there are some items that will take that kind of time. If it feels really urgent to the people who on a day-to-day basis are dealing with these applications to get something better in there now, I think you could adapt not exactly what was sent to you on Friday, but something not that far off sooner if you wanted to.
I guess I'll add a few thoughts onto that. Thank you, Chloe. As you know, I've been a big, this has been a really important goal for me, and I think I've expressed that to both the Planning Commission and to staff and the council, because I feel we have a saldo application process that causes stress and confusion for both borough staff as well as applicants, especially when we have plan revisions in terms of determining what's a new plan, what's a revised plan. In terms of the tentative sketch application, which the MPC, which is the state code governing everything we do, doesn't require people to do. And I think it also, not necessarily to speak for the Planning Commission, But I think it puts our planning commission in a little bit of an awkward spot to have to actually, and council to actually have to make a formal vote on a tentative sketch plan when, there's a certain, tentative sketch implies a certain lack of detail, and you're potentially, committing yourself on the record to approving something that once you learn more about it or more of those details are fleshed out, you may feel differently about it. And I also think, while, no offense to the folks in the crowd, our biggest priority isn't necessarily the applicant experience, but I also wanted to recognize that, making these applications do involve, a certain amount of time and money for the applicant. And it also involves a certain amount of time, for Borough Council and for the Planning Commission to, review and discuss those. Now, as Chloe said, I'm certainly not discouraging, this tentative plan application. I think there's a lot of benefit in allowing the Planning Commission to really troubleshoot some things, and on the flip side, save the applicants some hassle down the line if there's something early on that's flagged that's going to be problematic for the borough. But I think right now our salary leans more toward the side with the way that the tentative sketch plan process is set up right now. I think it's more problematic than beneficial for the borough, and the application process overall, again, I think causes, the staff, just a lot of issues in terms of the plan review periods. And again, I think it causes a lot of confusion and stress, from what I've seen on my end. No one in this crowd is saying anything like this to me, but just from my perspective, I feel like it also causes some confusion and stress on the applicant side, as well. So that's why I feel like it is, at least that portion of it feels a little bit urgent to me. I guess the other thing that I would throw out there and say is I have not been intimately involved in this process. It's something that Michelle Carroll and her role with the borough has taken the lead on addressing, given it being a planning and zoning issue. And I'm very grateful for the amount of time the Planning Commission has spent on this, the amount of time that Todd personally has spent working on this, the amount of time that Chloe and others have put into this. But I guess I would also just throw out there that while we want to get this right, I also don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And as Chloe also mentioned, a saldo, it's not like we're going to do this and then we're never going to touch it again, or we're not going to touch it again for 10 years. A saldo is a continual, things happen and things change, and we get better and we learn new things, and it's going to be a document that, every so often we're going to have to make tweaks to it. So I do appreciate, what our Planning Commission chairs offered in terms of maybe really focusing on some core elements, and then maybe some of the things that, aren't felt to be quite as core, that we really maybe take more time on those and then come back to Borough Council. But I also do just want to be mindful of the Planning Commission's time, Borough Council's time, and the professional staff's time as we work through those issues as well.
So if I may suggest something here, I'm just wondering, near the end of the year, we're going to hit our budget, and we're going to be discussing budget a lot of the time. So I'm wondering if it's going to be possible to have this brought to council, maybe in October, or if that's too aggressive a timeline. Let's say you triage right now and you separate out certain things that are just going to be dealt with later, and you stick with cleaning up the language of the core material. Is this something we can have in final form in 3 months? What do you think?
I think so. I think we have an adoptable form, that's my opinion.
You think it's an adoptable form now? So maybe 3 months is, well.
No, I don't think you could quite adopt. Well, for one, it hasn't had full solicitor review. So
right.
Who knows what your solicitor is going to tell us we have to change.
Yeah,
be joking about it. That's actually a very important and key part of the process. And there may be some policy issues that once you've all looked at, some of those sections that you want to spend time discussing in your meetings, and let us know what you want to change. So those things definitely need to happen. And then I can continue to work with the planning commission to clean up some of the key issues and make additional revisions.
Todd, what do you think of that timeline? Does that seem reasonable to you?
Generally, in terms of a workflow of working on the saldo, I have no concerns. I'm sure the amount of work that has to be done can be accomplished in that time. The only concern I would raise is, I can't predict what else is going to be on our plate in September or October at the Planning Commission meeting. But, if we had to manage this by holding a special meeting at some point in that time frame, then that's what we would do. So, Fred, I think it's a reasonable goal to set. And we don't meet in August. Our next meeting's in September anyway.
Okay, let's make sure that council is comfortable with the idea of sort of segmenting certain material and saving it for later, basically. Some of these studies that you're referring to, or possibly that you mentioned lighting and bicycle parking, that have yet to be kind of fully conceptualized. So saving those for later. Does anybody on council have a problem with that approach to this? Okay.
All right.
Well,
Mr. I'm sorry.
Barbara has a question. I just had a question. I just wanted to make sure, Todd, is there anything else besides us giving that direction tonight that you need from us in the near term? Because when I read your letter, I was like, I don't think you're asking us to review the text of the ordinance carefully and rigorously, but I wasn't sure because that was in the fourth council section. I wasn't sure exactly what it was that you would like us to do right now. And I wanted to make sure that we compare that. So.
Well, I'm sorry that I was not able to hear Chloe's presentation because I'm in California and I was in the middle of meetings all afternoon. But I'm sure Chloe called out to you some very important policy changes, in addition to those that Samantha called out about the processing. One of the most important ones is the inclusion of open space requirements, which is a brand new element of the code. So I think that language, and I think the language of processing is very far along. It really just needs a tight read and edit. And so it may be valuable to speed this along for council to consider those aspects of the saldo from a policy point of view. Are you comfortable with the process modifications that the borough manager laid out? We're all comfortable with them. We've worked them through. There's no policy discussions we're having. It's mostly wording. But are you comfortable with that? And I think the open space requirement is a new thing. And so are you comfortable with that? You could look at that as a policy question. You could really look at the text as it is, just to kind of get those conversations out of the way before you get the final ordinance. So that's something perhaps I would call your attention to. There might be other things of that nature, but none that come to mind right at this minute.
Thank you. Okay, so it sounds like our plan is for council members who will be looking specifically at those, looking at the ordinance, specifically looking at the sections that Chloe and flagged as raising sort of policy issues that we need to consider. Maybe we can do that in a month or so. In the meantime, it sounds like the planning commission will be looking towards presenting us with a sort of core set of the provisions that we could be moving towards passing as early as October, pending solicitor review. Does that sound right? Samantha, does that work for you?
Yeah, that sounds really great.
Great. All right, Todd, would you be, if nobody has any, does anybody have further comments or questions on this all? And Todd, I was wondering if we could have a discussion of the green building zoning bonus, which is the first time that council has seen this provisions.
Certainly. So this is a continuation of a conversation that's been going on for several years. We are hearing a request from council. We're hearing requests from the community about how the borough can incentivize green building practices. That's a big umbrella of a topic. and in particular, Borough Council is interested in knowing if it would be possible to incentivize those through the zoning code to somehow or another provide zoning preferences or bonuses in exchange for incorporating green building practices. So what I have submitted to council with my letter of July 11th is a framework for thinking about this, a kind of a framework that will help us do the research that's necessary to figure out what kind of tools, what zoning code amendments, what kind of administrative tools might be necessary, and honestly, to figure out whether this is an effective strategy at all. So what we're looking for is your thoughts about this framework. Does this approach make sense, understanding that there are a lot of details that still have to be worked out? So that's what I'm presenting to you. And by the way, Planning Commissioner Jennifer Jajewski-Hahn worked on this as well, this memo. So it's reflects a lot of her work. I don't know if she's in the room, but I don't see her on the Zoom. So the framework has a couple of key points, all of which need to be fleshed out more. But the first is, in order to obtain a bonus, which I'll explain what that might mean in a minute, an applicant for land use or subdivision. So as you understand that is a subset of things that get built in the borough, or an application that requires a zoning review. So the applicant would have to, in order to achieve a bonus, demonstrate compliance with a variety of green building and sustainable development practices. Now, this is a list, it's a menu. It can be developed to address Narberth's particular interests and needs. Some of those things might include provision of alternative energy sources, providing enhanced stormwater management levels, using sustainable construction materials, recycling construction waste. There are a variety of things we could consider. As long as we can measure them and document them, we could consider them. So if an applicant did these things, what would the borough give them? Really, the thing that zoning can provide is development capacity. Like, you can do more or you can do something different if you provide these benefits. So concrete examples of how that might work are in the 5A district, most of which is now limited to 25 feet and 2 stories. An idea would be to say, well, you know what? We will raise that back to 3 stories where it had been. We'll raise it back to 35 feet or 36 feet if, for applicants who provide these green building benefits in their project. Looking across the borough, there might be other ways to incentivize this. In the 5B district, Montgomery Avenue, we allow for 45-foot buildings, but they can only be 3 stories tall. So what we might say is, well, you know what? In Montgomery Avenue, we'll lower that. You can build a 3-story or 36-foot building. But if you do the green building practices, you can build 45 feet or 4 stories. So we kind of knock it down a little bit, the base, and then give it back if they do green building. That could be an idea for the 5B zone. We could even look at residential zones. Right now, a new house in a residential zone, the facade of the house, one metric we could consider is the facade of a house can now be 115% of the average facade size of that block. We could say, for a standard project, your facade size can only be 100% of the average size on that block. But if you incorporate green building standards, we will let you increase that to 115%. So at the end of the day, it's not more than anyone would be allowed now. In fact, what we're saying is we would, as a matter of right, allow less than we allow now, but then allow people to get back to what we allow now if they provide green buildings. So I think the Planning Commission's clear direction was we do not want to create a bonus that allows for more building, more density, more massing than is already contemplated or was contemplated in the form-based code. So that means we would need to find places to reduce things so we could bring them back up. So that's what the applicants would get. The bonus, this process, the third point is would be managed as a checklist with objective performance-based criteria. Now, there are similar checklists that are used in other municipalities. If you follow this topic, you've heard about the Green Points system, which is used in Doylestown and Swarthmore. That's one we could look at building on. That is used in those communities to provide for fee reductions, not zoning bonuses. So we'd have to see if it works. But the idea is there would be a checklist, and if you do certain things on this checklist, which are objective and measurable, then you would qualify for this bonus. The application review would have to be undertaken by a qualified professional. Right now, we have a building and zoning code officer. That person may be qualified to do this, or if it's an additional work or there's additional qualifications needed, the borough could contract with somebody else who can look at an application and see whether or not it's compliant with the code. That is a service or a cost that could be paid for by the applicant as a fee. You know, if you're applying for this bonus, you have to pay a fee for the review process. The compliance would further be monitored, not just at the application, but when the certificate of occupancy is sought, to make sure that the development includes those things that were promised. It's a very tricky question. How this is enforced once the building is finished? We would need to seek a lot of guidance from the solicitor on that. But it's a checklist with objective performance-based criteria managed by at an administrative level. Finally, the last component of this is relatedly, we've heard from time to time concern that certain zoning code provisions might inadvertently prevent people from making green building improvements. So the easiest example here would be perhaps a homeowner wants to put a solar panel on their roof, but by doing so, they have a conflict with the roof slopes requirements in the zoning code. Rather than try to engineer the zoning code to anticipate every potential conflict and fix it, which would be virtually impossible, the framework idea is to create a special exception process so that an application for green building improvement that requires minor relief from the code could simply go to the zoning hearing board and seek relief. And there would have to be criteria or conditions, outlined as to how that's managed. But rather than re-engineering our code for every specific green building technology, it could be simply to have a special exception that could be applied for. And as you know, special exception is a much easier relief to obtain than a variance, which would probably not be an effective way to manage this. So those are the four key elements of the framework that, as you can see, would require a lot of work to frame out, to flesh out. But if Borough Council believes that is a good framework, which is what we're looking for your guidance on, then we could go about the work of really investigating this in more detail. There have been some questions and concerns raised already, which I should report to you. Some of the architects on the Planning Commission have said the applications for these types of green building bonuses can be quite cumbersome and expensive to fill out. So how can this be a process where the process itself doesn't discourage people from trying to use it? The cost of inspecting a completed building to make sure the features are actually in there can be expensive. Is that a cost that can be recovered? And I think the biggest question is the benefits the applicant receives will be substantial and permanent. How can the borough ensure that these improvements will also be permanent? How does enforcement work if a development becomes non-compliant? For example, suppose somebody gets a zoning bonus an extra floor on their building for putting a solar panel on alternative energy. And then they decide alternative energy isn't their thing. They don't want it. It doesn't work. Or a new owner comes along and says, I don't want solar power. What do? We've given someone a whole extra floor of their building to put on solar power. And then they take it away. How is that enforced? So that's really a question to talk with the borough solicitor about. So the Planning Commission believes this is a good framework for further exploration. It can be tailored to meet Narberth's needs. There are some challenges with it, and we're looking for Borough Council's guidance about whether we should pursue this framework.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, and there was another memo there. I think we sort of mutually agreed that in view of the size of our agenda, we will be pushing off any discussion of 5H or revisions to a future time. I wanted to get council members' general sense of if we can go around the videos and comment whether or not you would like to see the Planning Commission, whether you would take their recommendation and like to see them pursue this framework for green bonus points plan. Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Todd and Planning Commission for putting this together. Broadly speaking, I think this is the solution that we've been looking for, because we know that we can't exceed the Commonwealth, construction standard. So this is a way of incentivizing rather than compelling, I guess. So my suggestion is that we kind of narrow the menu to transportation and energy so that the incentives are clearly aligned with the climate action plan, which is really focused on those goals in terms of carbon reduction. And those are improvements that can be easily documented, often through PICO rebates, for example. So that's one suggestion. I'm also aware that the EAC has reviewed this earlier in the week. They had a meeting, I think, Monday. And I know that they're going to put a memo together to send to all of us, including planning. So I would just ask if you could consider their recommendations. I'm sure you will. My last thought is just, Michelle had raised a few months ago the idea of using these standards not just for kind of a fourth floor or on new construction, but also possibly for the ADUs. That was just something we talked about at one point. So I don't know if there could be, if some of this framework could be extended to the ADUs is a question I have.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions or comments? Fred?
Sure. So I'm delighted to see this before us. I mean, this was an issue that before I joined council, I actually worked on a green buildings memo that I think I sent to council. Some of you may remember getting it. I think this is a great approach, and I'm glad that I know that Planning Commission has been wrangling with this for quite some time, and I think you've hit upon a very good way to handle it. I look forward to seeing specific suggestions down the line. I mean, I think EAC would be a good source to work with for menu items, perhaps on the checklist. And I think, Rob's right. We did mention ADUs as possibly the right to build an ADU is also, requires some sort of green work on it. I'm getting a note that my internet connection is unstable, so hopefully you can hear me. But I think I'll just cut it short there. I think this is great, and I look forward to seeing it further developed.
Okay, Ira?
Yeah, just one quick clarification. I thought I heard you say that in order to keep the energy usage down, you would limit the size of a property that did not conform to this. So this wouldn't be a growth in the size of the building, but actually the baseline would reduce. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other council members, comments or questions? Is there anybody that is uncomfortable with Planning Commission pursuing this framework? I think you have your I think we have a consensus here. I'm also delighted to see this come before us. So I support this framework and I look forward to seeing it develop. Anything else for us, or we let you?
That feedback, that's the EAC, ADU, very hearing what the EAC can bring to the table. Rob, it may be, Councilmember McGreevy, it may be useful to have an offline conversation with you about the different items in the checklist and how they align with the priorities you see. But I think all that's great feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd. Good night. Barbara, did you have that?
No, we're tabling that.
Oh, we're tabling.
Yeah, so I think Cindy has a question.
Oh, Cindy did. I missed that.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was clapping hands. Thank you.
Gotcha. So it's a little raised hand.
Okay.
No, clapping. I'll do a party emoji next time.
Thank you again, Todd.
And this is sorry if I may, one last FYI for council and for Todd. So Borough staff earlier today agreed to meet on August 24th to talk about this proposal as well in preparation for the September Planning Commission meeting.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we made it through all the items in number 9. That's great. Okay, so next up, we have our consent agenda items for approval. I would need a motion.
Yep, I move that Borough Council approve the consent agenda items A through E.
All in favor?
Well, wait.
Oh, discussion.
Yeah, that motion needs to be, because we changed the agenda, the motion needs to be items A through F.
I'm sorry, Cindy. It did not reflect the addition of item F. Would you mind restating it? Thank you.
You know what? I'm sorry, you're all a little muffled, but I think you said restate it. I move that Borough Council approve the consent agenda items.
That's fine.
A through.
Good. Okay.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you for catching that. Okay. Okay, moving on to our action items. The first item of business is resolution 2026. Correct, Cindy.
Hang on, I'm scrolling through. If somebody has it in front of them, feel free to move.
Move that we consider the resolution 2022-16 approval of 146 Marion Avenue tentative plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Thank you. I'll second.
Okay. Seconded by Councilor. I think Solicitor Walthall, be appropriate for you to speak to this resolution and what the limitations and conditions of approval are?
Sure.
Thank you.
So there was a resolution drafted as standard condition for any tentative sketch plans that you may have seen for really, again, limiting the approvals to that tentative sketch plan level with the need to provide additional detail at subsequent reviews. But also, again, starting to incorporate the more permanent conditions of land development agreements, providing financial security, ensuring that the common areas are maintained by homeowners associations. And there is a specific provision in there to ensure that the movement of the house is done in a safe and feasible manner, comply with all of the conditions of the review letters, including the Narberth Planning Commission review letter, the Borough Engineer, zoning officer, and the County Planning Commission. So at this point in time, the resolution is before council for consideration. It is for the plan that was presented earlier today.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? No? Okay, then this is in position to vote. All in favor of approving resolution 2022-16, 146 Marion Avenue tentative plan? Any opposed? Okay, there are six ayes and 1 opposed. Passes. Okay. Moving on to item 11B, consideration of acceptance of resignation of John Gallagher. Do I have a motion?
I move to consider the acceptance of the resignation of John Gallagher.
Second.
Thank you. Okay. There is in fact a letter from Chief Gallagher. Is there any discussion? Would anybody like to make any comments or discuss it? Yes.
I just want to say that John has stated clearly he's enjoyed his time working in the borough, and that it's just a matter of an opportunity presenting itself that's too good to pass up, and that otherwise he would have, he did enjoy his time here, and he's done a lot. And I just again want to reiterate my thanks to him.
That's right.
All right, thank you. As someone who's had an opportunity to work closely with John over the past year, I actually met John in my last job, and while there are lots of reasons, I'm very glad to be here in Arbor Borough. Having the opportunity to work with him as police chief was definitely one of them. I'll definitely be sad to see him go, and was grateful for the opportunity to work with him over the past year. And I definitely just wish him the best in everything he does in the future.
Thank you. Yes, Chief Gallagher's gracious letter to us is in the packet, and the public will care to read it. He has also written a lengthy and very heartfelt sort of a tribute to our officers in our department, which has been in our weekly newsletters. I think he's done a wonderful job here, and we will miss him.
I think Fred wanted to.
Fred.
Yeah, just echoing what everyone has said. He's been a steady and reliable presence in the borough, and he's really done great things to improve the police department and to ensure that it meets state standards, and really has come up. The performance has come up greatly since he's been our chief. So, thank you, Chief Gallagher, and we appreciate the work you've done.
Any other council members? Okay. We do need to vote to accept Chief Gallagher's resignation. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Next up, item 11C. Consideration of payment of 80 hours of vacation time for John Gallagher for $4,727.20. Manager Brian, do we need a motion? Oh, sorry.
I move that we consider paying 80 hours of vacation time to John Gallagher for $4,727.20.
And I will second that.
So currently the borough personnel manual does not allow for the payout of vacation time when an employee leaves service in the borough. However, right now FNA is talking about some updates to the personnel manual. And I think one of them that I'm ultimately going to propose is that council consider changing that policy to allow for some kind of vacation payout, which I've found to be the standard practice and all the other municipalities I've worked for and interacted with. Specifically with Chief Gallagher's request, he's actually forfeiting a considerable amount of vacation time. And so in light of that, and the fact that he stayed above and beyond what's required as part of his notice and transition period over the last month, especially, making sure he was here to see us through the 4th of July celebration, I would recommend in favor of council approving this request for this payout of a portion of his vacation time with more than the majority of it to be forfeited.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions or discussion? Okay. All in favor of the payment of 80 hours of vacation time to John Gallagher? It's unanimous. It passes. Moving on to action item 11D. Nope, sorry, 11D. Consideration of advertising of ordinance to create no parking areas.
I move that Borough Council approve advertisement ordinance to create no parking areas.
I'll second that. This is the one I was supposed to second. Yeah.
It's all good. Okay. Rob, is this John? Will you speak?
I'm happy to just say that the purpose of this ordinance is, now this ordinance won't really make any changes to the day-to-day operations of the borough. These will be sort of enumerating the areas in the borough that are already marked as no parking. It's best practices and for enforceability purposes to ensure that there are codes that also have those areas marked as no parking. So this will then just codify what's already in existence throughout the borough.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? So my understanding, this creates no additional no parking area. This is an administrative measure.
That's fine.
Yeah, there's no policy change here.
That's my understanding. And if in the future something was to change, it would be added to this list of things changing.
Understood. Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, moving on to action item 11E, consideration of approval of borough security camera recording policy.
I move that Borough Council approve Borough security camera recording policy.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So this policy, I basically took the, one from, I forget the name of the municipality. The one that was the sample one that was in your packet. Thank you. Another Providence township that was in your packet last month. Took the feedback from council and some input from the borough solicitor. I also reached out to the chief of police and the company installing the cameras to get some feedback from them. And this policy is in your, more applicable for the borough is in your packet. I just really want to emphasize for council and the public the purpose of the security cameras, which I tried to point out in this policy, is to be reactive, not to be proactive. The goal of this is not to do any regular monitoring. The goal is solely, in the event of some very specific situations, if someone has filed a criminal complaint with the police department about something that's happened on borough property, if someone has filed a claim against our liability insurance for something that happened on borough property, or someone has in some other way, shape, or form filed litigation against the borough that involves something that happened on borough property. Also, this policy points out there's no audio recording involved in these cameras. It's solely video recording. And then I thought it was really important, something from the draft that we took from that I thought was really important for this community was explicit language that the goal of these cameras is not to target any specific group, whether it's race, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability status, age, what have you. And so I hope that this policy kind of fits in with the goals and expectations of Borough Council. But I'm definitely very happy to hear any feedback, and if we need to make any further changes, I'm certainly happy to incorporate those.
Thank you. Are there any comments or is there any discussion?
I just wanted to thank you for putting the effort in doing this. It's just better off having something written down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I would point out that not only is it sort of the goal of this is to be reactive rather than proactive, but active monitoring by personnel is expressly prohibited. It shall never be active monitoring in violations of this policy would subject the person to dismissal. So it's quite strongly worded. It's more than just guidance, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, well then, let's go. Okay, all in favor of approving the Borough security camera recording policy? It's unanimous. Passes. Thank you. Okay, action item 11F, consideration of resolution 2022-17 in support of bus route 41. Oh, that's me. All right, I move the Borough Council resolution 2022-17 in support of bus route 44.
I second.
Good. Okay. So yes.
Just a quick. Thanks. Just a quick comment, and I don't think we need to reopen the conversation, but I do ask if this does pass, if we could consider really intentionally putting it on the radar of community members, because this is really significant. I think particularly in a community that really is paying attention to issues of justice, I think we need to underscore what transportation and such infrastructure is and how that is an agent of justice. And the resolution really clearly, I think, does a nice job of spelling out how this is, in fact, a diversity and equity issue that I suspect our citizens and our neighbors are going to want to really be informed about. And I would encourage them to contact SEPTA. We can do this resolution, but it's important for our neighbors to really advocate for those visitors who depend on the 44 to come and visit and work in our town. So I don't know if that's a request that council can make to the office of really perhaps intentionally getting us out via the flash or social media. That's all.
Thank you, President Bush.
Yeah, so Michelle had suggested that I read this aloud, given that it's a fairly short resolution, and then I'll talk a little about. I've been in communication with some transit advocates about next steps and outreach to other important figures who could help us make sure this stays policy. So let me go ahead and I will, with everyone's indulgence, I will read the resolution. So. Whereas, due to Narberth's location on the famous Main Line, much of its character and history has been bound up with public transportation. Whereas, as of 2016 to 2020, 16% of the borough's working population that commuted to work did so via public transportation. Whereas, in 2020, the Borough of Narberth adopted a comprehensive plan, which calls upon the borough to partner with transit agencies to improve access to public transportation options and cultivate ridership among visitors and residents. Whereas in 2021, the Borough of Narberth adopted a climate action plan, which calls upon the borough to work with SEPTA to expand public transportation options within the borough. Whereas the SEPTA bus route 44 passes through the Borough of Narberth and serves as both a primary transportation option for some commuters and an essential backup plan for others when the Paoli-Thorndale train line is not running. Whereas both the comprehensive plan and the climate action plan call upon the borough to establish bus shelters for SEPTA bus route 44 in locations throughout the borough. Whereas while the SEPTA bus route 44 includes multiple service patterns, SEPTA's most recent analysis of the route indicates that the stops serving Narberth train station see consistently higher ridership activity than the stops served by Route 44's more direct service pattern that does not serve Narberth train station. Whereas SEPTA bus route 44 serves a diverse and historically underprivileged ridership, which is majority BIPOC and includes a significant proportion of individuals living in poverty. Whereas, according to a 2019 SEPTA report on bus routes, which is the most recent information available, the SEPTA bus route 44 was not listed as an underperforming route. Whereas in its current plans for a bus revolution, SEPTA plans to eliminate the SEPTA bus route 44. Whereas SEPTA has suggested that the bus route 44 could be replaced by a microtransit zone covering a portion of the former route, but has not provided details of how this microtransit zone would operate or how much it would cost to use. Whereas Narberth Borough Council wishes to work with SEPTA to strengthen bus route 44, not to eliminate it. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Narberth Borough Council hereby calls upon SEPTA to maintain bus route 44 service through Narberth to Center City, Philadelphia, in order to better serve underprivileged commuters, reduce automobile miles traveled, and strengthen the long tradition of public transit linking Narberth to Philadelphia. Now, be it further resolved, the Narberth Borough Council declares its desire to work with SEPTA to establish bus shelters in the borough at key locations along SEPTA bus route 44 in accordance with its comprehensive plan and climate action plan. Now, there was a recommendation to add that we actually believe that Route 44 should go through Ardmore to Narberth to Center City, Philadelphia, to sort of keep the full route because, many people, we don't really intend to have it stop here in Narberth. So I think I will offer that as a friendly amendment. I'm not totally sure how that process works out, but I'd like to offer that as a suggestion to say that it be amended to say that to maintain bus route 44 service from Ardmore through Narberth to Center City, Philadelphia, something like that. Okay, so that's the text of the resolution. I mean, I was contacted originally. I found some people published an op-ed in the Inquirer complaining about the microtransit as a substitute for buses, saying that it doesn't serve enough people. It hasn't worked out where they've tried it. It's been too expensive to maintain, and it just much fewer people use microtransit than use a bus line. They suggested reaching out. I think, assuming we pass this resolution, it would be possible to reach out to Lower Marion and show them the resolution. I mean, it directly affects a majority of the wards in Lower Marion, which are on the 44 bus, and even the county commissioners who might also be interested in supporting this. I mean, I talked to Mary Jo Daly, who has fond memories of riding the 44 bus. So I think there's a number of different people who we can bring in. SEPTA is, still in their public comment period. So it's the right time to, make this expression, I think.
Mayor George.
I think it's a really important resolution. I think it would be really important to get this in front of the board of SEPTA and get it to the people who are making the decisions. So if there's a way of doing that, I think that would be a really important element.
Bob?
I'd just like to second Fred's friendly amendment to include the bus route through Ardmore.
Thank you. You know what? We should do it that way. All right. So we now have a motion on the table. We haven't voted on this ever so. We haven't even brought it. Sorry, I think this is a bit disorganized. Do we have a motion on the table? Motion. Okay. It was seconded. We're in discussions. Now it's an amended motion on the table. There's a second to Bob's amendment.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. And there's one final comment. There is an additional comment. All right.
Right. So at the end of the day, if there's something that we or the community can do to get more people to ride the 44, that would be the thing that would be the most convincing to SEPTA is ridership numbers going up. I know you said they're already high, but that's how people make decisions.
Yes.
So just on that point, I think that is really important. And in the last few months, Missy has added information out in the lobby, in our information kiosk around the borough, and on the borough website about the SEPTA route and information about it. But if there's any other ways we can get the information out to people or encourage them to use the bus or the train, I think that's great for everyone.
Okay. Any further discussion of this before we vote on it? Andrew? Yes.
I wonder if we could, along Samantha's point, if we could get it in the newsletter.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
I mean, or we should at least summarize that they're thinking of canceling the route, that they're proposing to cancel the route, and you should email them here if you want to.
Let's make it official and pass the resolution.
Yeah.
As amended to add, so the resolution as amended to add from Ardmore to Northern Center City, Philadelphia. All in favor?
Right.
It's unanimous. It sounds as though we are all clearly in strong consensus that we would like to publicize this resolution, put it on our website, put it in the weekly newsletter, put it on social media. I would add for any members of the public that are watching and thinking, how can I write to SEPTA? The only contact information I am aware of is an email address that was provided. It's busnetwork@septa.org. busnetwork@septa.org. Yes, please do write, and let's continue to brainstorm about ways that we can bus ridership and continue to advocate for preservation of Route 24. Okay, let us move on to action item 11G, consideration of updated traffic review policy.
I move that Borough Council approves updated traffic review policy.
Is there a second? I'll second. Okay. Thank you. There is a memo from our manager on this. Right. Sure. Thank you.
So I've been really excited by the borough's continued work to implement a traffic review policy and, have a policy that is clear and transparent for the public as well as data driven for the Public Health and Safety Committee and Borough Council. Now that we've been working to implement it and actually use it over the past 6 or 7 months, an issue that's popped up has been the way it's structured right now. If any one individual has a traffic concern about something, it goes through the full rigmarole of the review process. And there are 2 challenges that have resulted from that. Number one is we've had a couple instances where someone has reported a traffic concern, and then someone else who lives in the vicinity or the same area will have a different opinion on whether that's a traffic problem or not, or will think that the solution that we've implemented is actually creating a traffic problem itself. The second issue we're running into in public health and safety meetings is that by setting, again, I want people to feel like they're being heard and have an opportunity to share concerns with the borough. But given that it only takes one property owner to go, before public health and safety, a lot of the agenda for public health and safety has been taken over by traffic requests. And again, that's not to minimize the requests that we've received from people. It's just to say that I think, obviously, anyone who sends a concern to the borough, we're going to take seriously and we're going to look into it. But I think to go through the full traffic review process, there needs to be a higher threshold for what qualifies something to escalate to that level. And to that end, the borough engineer sent me the policy that Swarthmore Borough has, which is included in your packet. I think that's a great policy. I think that's a little bit more than what Narberth Borough needs. So the compromise that I've offered is to increase the threshold from 1 property owner to 3 property owners, and to also put language in there about, now that we've been doing this for a few months, we've had a couple people mention, well, what if your proposed solution doesn't actually solve my problem? Implementing in there as well a review process to ensure that we actually have solved the problem, and if not, what we would do to further evaluate it.
Thank you. Are there any comments or discussion from council members?
I just want to thank our manager for putting this process together and revising it.
Yeah.
So that it works even better. Thank you.
Okay, let's vote then. All in favor of the updated traffic review policy? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, action item 11I, 11H, consideration of skate park rental form and fee. This again.
Once I get a motion.
Oh. Okay, I move the Borough Council approve skate park rental form and fee.
Second.
Yeah, so the purpose behind this, as I note in my memo, is the skate park, I think overall is going very well. And we've already had interest in the borough from outside groups, most notably Skate the Boundary, with an interest in doing events and lessons and that sort of thing. Overall, the borough staff and the Parks and Rec Board, we're working on a overall sort of park rental process, because right now everything at the park is kind of, there's no process right now for it. Given that the skate park pilot, is a time limited situation, and tonight we're voting on new members for Parks and Rec, I was concerned that, well, I certainly in the future want Parks and Rec to be a part of this process. I was concerned that if we were to wait for the Parks and Rec Board to be reconstituted and get up to speed on the issue and make a decision on it, we would be completely past the window where it would be viable. So with some help with folks here in the borough, I put together notably the borough solicitor. I also welcome some input from our vice president, infrastructure chair, and a few others. We have this policy here tonight that will allow, families or institutions like Skate the Boundary to make use of the skate park on a private basis. And I'm proposing a fee of $250 for a 3-hour usage period. Of course, during hours that the skate park is open. So I'm happy to take any questions on it, and otherwise appreciate council giving this consideration.
So is there any sense of the interest level, and are there any limitations about how many hours a week it could be rented?
Yeah, so there is this does not have any limitation on the number of hours that it could be rented. I think the fee will probably deter people from going too overboard with that. And like I said, Skate the Boundary has expressed interest in the fall doing like a weekly, lesson sort of thing at the skate park. And then haven't had any, we don't have the actual form and fee yet, not any definitive nibbles, but here and there I've heard, from families and folks that use the skate park about how nice it might be to be able to rent it out.
Yeah, but that's kind of an interesting twist, because you say they're going to rent it for lessons, but now they're going to charge.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I hope they pay their business.
This is for checks. Okay, that's good. I will say, but in addition to Skate the Boundary, I've expressed interest in fact, there are quite a number of skate park users, families, borough parents have asked, "Hey, are you going to have lessons in there? My kid really wants to take lessons." So there seems to be strong interest. Cindy?
Just one comment, one question. I guess my only concern was 3 hours did seem like a long time that the park would be closed to kids and skaters who want to use it. So I do wonder if perhaps a 2-hour block of time where that would be closed to the public is more appropriate than 3 hours. And I think this is also a pilot. We've asked the question of how do other users and groups use our parks and recreations, and yet we're not charging money. And I agree that Parks and Recreation should give this a solid thought, but I also don't want to miss this opportunity for this to really collect some data and evidence to give Parks and Rec something thoughtful to explore. I do ask perhaps if we discuss if 3 hours to close the skate park to the public might be a little bit too long.
So I'll admit that the 3-hour number came from two sort of thought processes. One is, just like when people rent space here at 100 Conway, that time includes not just your time using it, but your time, like I don't know what kind of setup or cleanup people would have in the skate park, but there'd definitely be cleanup, I'm sure, but it would include all of that as well. And I'll also admit too, it's partially based on some information that Skate the Boundary gave me about, the structure of their lessons and how all that works.
I think it's cool to try for this year, and we can look at it again. For the future, there's nothing that we can't change it, right?
So, okay, I'm not the one who has a vote on this, so, I would certainly agree with that.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about something like an organization like Skate the Boundary that does lessons, they'd be looking to set up like one afternoon a week for like a 4 to 6 week block of lessons. That's about it. So I think it's pretty, I think as you well pointed out, the fee itself will be returned when you're going to sort of monopolize the skate park. I think there will be sort of limited use of this, but if for some reason it becomes out of hand or they refuse, I will be happy to.
Maybe a compromise. Sorry, this is like literally like on the spot, back in the napkin idea. Maybe a compromise to address the concern raised by Cindy that we could consider is maybe also offering like 1 hour walk for $100 for an hour.
I guess, yeah, I'm just thinking, Michelle, to hear you say, Skate the Boundary is going to do lessons from 4 to 6 every week. So if kids know or skaters know, I know that the park's closed on Wednesdays from 4 to 6 because there's private lessons, then that makes more sense to me. I'm just envisioning skaters coming and it being randomly closed and not accessible to them.
And I think these would be pre-scheduled events, and I would definitely want to post it.
Agreed. Yeah. So I agree. I didn't make that clear. Whenever whenever the skate park is rented, there would be a certain. I have to double check if it's in there or not, but I think there probably should be some minimum, time frame you have to let the, apply for in advance. And once it's approved, I would agree that as soon, within a business day after it's approved, there should be some sort of signage at the skate park telling people that the skate park will be closed on this date during this time for a private event.
That's great. And just to point out for folks, I mean, I believe there were individuals that held private tennis lessons and took the entire tennis courts up for years. And the borough made no revenue from that. And that was a private individual using our infrastructure. So I like that we're regulating this. I think it's a good pilot. I support that if we're publicizing when it's rented so we don't have skaters showing up very disappointed when they don't have access.
And just to make sure, I don't think you will, but just make sure our solicitor doesn't throw anything at me. I do want to, this is in the memo, but I want to make sure the public understands the goal of this policy and the fee is not to generate revenue for the borough, but it's to offset the, the wear and tear and the maintenance and just the time that staff have to put in to make programs like this possible. And to Cindy's point, or I think this is Cindy's point, when people use these facilities without having to, do anything for the borough, it's all the taxpayers that then have to bear the burden of when we have to do maintenance and repairs to those facilities.
I just want to point out that that's especially too with regard to our basketball courts, and they take leagues who take, whole nights, and there's payment involved, and the borough doesn't get payment for the use of those courts during those nights.
That's right. And this is something that I think we might even that our Parks and Recreation Department will be appointing new members, and when they convene, I think this is one of the top priority issues for them to bring this over the finish line. With respect to the skate park rental form here, are there any further comments on that? Or can we vote? Okay. All in favor of adopting the skate park rental form and fee? Unanimous. Thank you, Manager Bryant, for preparing that. Item 11I, consideration of extension of review for 230 Haverford Tentative Sketch to August 31st, 2023.
I move that Borough Council approve extension of review of 2030 Haverford Tentative Sketch to August 31st, 2023.
And that's not a typo, that is to 2023. That is not just the next month, but the next year. Through some early communications from the landowner and their attorney, it seems that they're ready to start to prepare discussions with the planning commission and with the public as to potential development uses and just general siting for that property. That obviously takes a long time to do. It would be a long process involving much feedback back and forth and much public involvement. And as such, they would like to provide that year-long extension in order to not have to continue to keep that current sketch plan that has been filed continued and extended. Because again, that was filed. It's still before council, but they're looking for alternative plans that might be more agreeable to all parties involved. So that's why they're asking for the extension at this point.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Unanimously passes. Okay, action item 11.
Vice President Van Alphen, if I could just say there is no actual second plan at this point in time, too. Again, this is more that they would be in the discussions with the planning commission to try to figure out what are the wants and the desires of that property.
Okay, action item 11J, consideration of resolution 2022-18 for multimodal grant application match for Town Square Phase 2 in Haverford Avenue, Borough, and North Avenue. So that's a motion. Nope, that wasn't a motion. That was just me saying what it is. Oh, I'm sorry.
I move that we consider resolution 2022-18 for multimodal grant application match for Town Square Phase 2 and Haverford Avenue, corridor
From Norworth Avenue to Wynwood Avenue.
I'll second that.
This was covered earlier in our meeting, during Bill Collins's presentation, and Manager Brian also discussed the grant and the application of the match. Are there any questions or is there any discussion at this time? I'll put it to a vote. All in favor? All right. Passes unanimously. And finally, action item 11K, public meeting recording retention policy.
I move the Borough Council adopt the public meeting recording retention policy.
Second.
Manager Brian, thank you.
Yeah, so following up from the resolution that council passed last month, requiring, all borough public meetings to be recorded, council asked me to develop a retention policy. So I looked back at past council resolutions regarding record retention, and, the borough, of course, has adopted the state record retention guidelines. Looking at those guidelines, they state that, recordings of public meetings should be kept as long as they're of administrative value. And I think all of us here would probably agree they'll be of administrative value for as long as we can possibly keep them, because you never know when you're going to need to, go back to some meeting from who knows when. So my proposal to council is that as long as the borough has the, the storage capacity to store them, which I think we do with SharePoint, it has a considerable amount of storage space. I think we should, and I think we should treat them as we treat any other record, in that when we dispose of a record, it requires council to approve a resolution to dispose of that record. So I would propose we keep them as long as we can, and none of them would be deleted unless council passed the resolution, authorizing the deletion of those files.
Any questions or discussion? I do have one question, either council members, or maybe just a suggestion or a food for thought. No, it makes sense that we would only keep them on our own active servers as long as they were administratively necessary. At some point, we will run out of room. Probably, it's hard to imagine. I was thinking in anticipation of that, maybe the borough could consult with our librarian or archivist or friends of our history about transferring them to some hopefully future-proof for the storage medium for posterity, if that's possible.
For historian. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that discussion. Absolutely.
Because I'm sure that people are going to be watching this meeting.
Yeah.
In
2055.
Yes. Okay. Any other comments or discussion, Fred?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying you're laughing, but my dad was just telling me that he got asked about a meeting that he'd had 25 years ago at one point. So it happens.
Okay. All in favor of public meeting recording retention policy? Aye. Unanimous? Okay. We are through the action items. Information items and monthly reports have been filed. So any discussion or comments about the monthly reports? No. Moving on, there are no items of new business this time. Old business. Review of applicants for Parks and Recreation Board vacancies. As we know, there are 4 vacancies for the Parks and Recreation Board, and just to review the terms. Right now, the board has staggered 4-year terms. There are 2 terms that end in December 31st, 2023. There is 1 term that ends December 31st, 2024, and 1 term that ends December 31st, 2025. 4 openings. We received 4 application letters. They were from Dennis Bogan, Jean Burrock, Chris McLeod, and Michelle Clark. So that works out conveniently because we have 4 and 4, which is nice. I would just like to say, I was personally very impressed with all of the letters, the qualifications, the thoughtfulness of all of the applicants. Again, and I know we say this frequently, it is always amazing to find out how blessed we are in this borough and sort of how richly resourced we are with amazingly qualified folks with great minds and community dedication. That said, with the 4 and 4, I was thinking, unless there's any objection, council, if there's any council member who is not comfortable with appointing these 4 members based on their written submissions and would like to conduct interviews or anything, speak up now. Okay, hearing no objection, it sounds like we can do this. If there are any council members that would like to make any comments or say anything on behalf of any of these applicants? I see none. At this point, I would entertain a motion for appointment of these 4 members to these 4 spots.
Okay. I move that Borough Council make the following appointments to the Parks and Recreation Board. Chris McLeod and Michelle Parton for terms ending December 31st, 2023. Jean Borough for a term ending December 31st, 2024. And Dennis Brogan for a term ending December 31st, 2025.
Is there a second? Seconded? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I will take a vote. All in favor? Aye, it's unanimous. Congratulations to the applicants. And I think that Borough will be reaching out for next steps to set up the next meeting, the reorganization meeting. And I look forward to working with both the new applicants and our existing new members. Should be great. There are a lot of work. Okay, moving on to item 15, committee updates. Finance and administration.
Hi. Yep. I will be brief because of the time. We met prior to this meeting, and what you have to look forward to next meeting is the office and the staff took a look at F&A's feedback on the reception area and some suggestions, and really presented an image to us that reflected some of our concerns and our feedback. So much so that Finance and Administration has asked them to take that vision into something that we can all show to you next meeting, because we felt like at this point, this was really a discussion for the full council to have. So please look for that image in our August meeting so we can have a discussion on how the office space and reception area will change. I'd like to thank Council Member Barbara Fortner for really her leadership with the office and staff to look at the volunteer form and the process. That is complete and will be ready for August for your review. Not only is this a volunteer application form, but it is a process that ensures that volunteers for the borough understand what their expectations are, whether it's meeting reporting or sunshine laws. And we look forward to your review and getting that process up and going. The manager, Samantha, will also present at the August meeting the potential for us to enact an earned income tax and EIT. It was supported by the Finance and Administration to bring it to you all and present what we believe may be a really exciting possibility for the borough. So that will be in our August meeting. The fourth really kind of important agenda item is that there was discussion about the webpage. F&A has asked that Ryan, our intern, spend the next 4 weeks using the skills that we recruited him for to update our current webpage, and then we can evaluate that at our council meeting and say, is this something that we were able to do in-house, or is that something we should go back and consider outside firms to enhance? And that's all I have for F&A right now.
Thank you.
On the bridge construction inspector selection, the committee voted unanimously to recommend the selection of TPD due to the additional qualities of local reputation and the manager's prior positive experience. That's Transportation Planning and Design in partnership with McTish Uncle and Associates. Okay. The county transportation grant stormwater bump out design. Pinoni is finishing the design and putting together a bid package. Some of the choices the borough will need to make include the types of vegetation to use and whether to hire a contractor for the planting or to do the work internally. The Haverford Avenue of stormwater ran a little bit behind schedule. Manager Brian, is that now pretty much complete?
I think that's pretty close. I think it might actually be, we're being recorded, but it might be done tomorrow, but we'll see.
Okay. For the 2023 budget, the committee did not wish to suggest undertaking new project at this time, but rather wanted to focus the budget adequate funds to engage in the kind of planning for projects that have already been identified. And that includes active transportation planning, master parks, town square, and Sabine Avenue. Okay, then we also discussed some rainy day capital repairs in case there are major problems at 201 Sabine while we still have renters. And we're going to get an update on that at the next meeting, which I believe is this week.
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. And then Parks and Rec, we talked about identifying a charge for them, which includes master park planning, finalizing and implementing a park permit and fee program, reinstituting summer camp program, consideration of winter bathroom closures, annual user and stakeholder meeting, and the skate park pilot. But I guess that's subject to their reorganization meeting.
Right.
Happening shortly. Okay, then the paving, we need to have more discussion about this next week, but the borough has repaved the worst segment rated 4, which is on Dudley Avenue, and there are about 40% of the remaining is rated 3, which is I guess the rating goes from 1 to 5, 5 being the worst. And we'll be discussing that this week as well, about what the strategy for funding that is. And then we talk about residential EV chargers, and that project seems to be going well. Is there any update on that, Manager Brian, or that's still in conversation between Pico and Flow?
So I guess I would say on that is those conversations are pretty much resolved. We have I wouldn't call it final because council has to approve it, but a breakdown of detailed proposed locations and costs. And that's going to be presented to Public Health and Safety on August 5th. And then we'll hopefully, depending on the feedback there, we'll possibly come to council on August 18th.
Okay. Public Health and Safety, Rob?
Yeah, so we didn't meet in July. Our next meeting is the first Friday in August. But briefly, I'll just say two things. We are planning to make appointments with the council to the new police advisory committee. And so we have put out a call for members, and anyone interested can send a letter of interest to the office. I think that will also be in the weekly emails.
Now they can use the new form.
Yeah. Well, no, council hasn't approved it yet.
So that's the main thing. And then also we have been working with the EAC over the summer. We've had a number of meetings, and they're preparing an update for council in the fall to monitor our progress on the climate action plan. So that's it for now.
Thank you.
Okay. So in August, at our August business meeting, we're expecting to have for council to consider a proposal for replacement of the analog parking meters, which are slowly dying and just not able to cannibalize and repair them anymore. Also, a proposal for a parking permit program for the 201 Sabine lot to control what's parked up there. And then also have our final recommendations on a residential parking permit program for council to consider do with that as they do, if they work through that. Our next meeting is Tuesday, July 26th.
Are there any comments for the good of council? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Adjournment? Aye. Meeting is adjourned.